This happened about 10 years ago. I, at the time, was dating my now husband, and we had planned a dinner with his family at his mother's house. The dinner was set for a Friday, and being that we were going there after work, we drove in our separate cars. His mother didn't live in the best of neighborhoods, but I wouldn't call it a ghetto by any means. When I arrived with my two sons, there wasn't any parking on our street, so I was forced to park on the side street next to our house. When I parked, I noticed how odd it was that our street was full of cars, but the side street I parked on was pretty empty other than the houses. After getting out of the car, I was carrying my 2-year-old son while my 10-year-old held my hand. I noticed a white pickup truck driving towards us at a very slow pace. He did not appear to be looking at the houses as someone would be if they were looking for a house address. He kept his stare on us. As I kept walking to turn the corner to my mother-in-law's house, he drove right past us and never took his glare off of us. I locked eyes with him as I was in the protective mommy mode, and he turned away and kept driving. After a few hours, it's late and dark outside, and we all get ready to leave. My 12-year-old stepdaughter wanted to ride home in my car. I told my husband I would meet him at home since he was still saying his goodbyes and wasn't completely ready to leave. As we walked to the car, I had my 2-year-old that I'm carrying while my stepdaughter and son are walking next to me. As we turn the corner, I see my car and I see the same white truck parked right behind it with the creepy guy inside and his engine running. There aren't many other cars parked on this particular street, so there should be no reason for him to be parked right behind my car. I tell the kids to be careful and stay close. As we get closer, his eyes lock with mine. Neither he nor I look away. I see pure evil on his face. His expression never changes, and his eyes staring start making the hairs on my neck stand up. At this point, the kids notice him and start getting scared. For a split of a second, I questioned if I should walk back to my mother-in-law's house, but for whatever reason, I kept walking to my car. As I get to the rear passenger side to open the door to put my son in the car, the guy reached out of his roll-down car window to unlock his driver's door, all the while not taking his eyes off of me. And as he gets out of the car and before he even had a chance to run up to us, I scream as loud as I can for the kids to run. I start running, still with my 2-year-old in my hand, and my stepdaughter and son are in front of me attempting to run away. As I'm running, I turn around and sure enough, this creep is chasing after us. My 10-year-old is slowing down and I give him a little push while yelling, "Run! Run!" I was yelling at the top of my lungs, yet no one came out of their house to help. Right before I turned the corner, I noticed a patch of grass and I thought I was going to lightly throw my son there and let this creep catch me since he was gaining on us, and I, as a mother, would of course rather him hurt me than any of my kids. Right before I did though, I see my husband run out of the house with his brother since his daughter had made it inside the house crying, telling him someone was chasing after us. They ran and the guy took off before they could even get a glimpse of him. The creep left his truck running and he was nowhere in sight. We called the police and when they examined his vehicle, they found his wallet, rope, and Clorox right in the front seat. The cops said whatever he was planning wasn't good. They eventually found him hiding under a car in a neighbor's driveway. They asked my stepdaughter and I to identify him. We were so shaken up and just seeing him again made us so upset. He was taken away and I couldn't sleep for days. I later found out after his arrest, his fingerprints came back as a suspect in an unsolved murder. Even after all these years, it still scares the hell out of me. I can't imagine what would have and could have happened to us, but I thank God nothing did. I am a 20-year-old female from New York, and at the time this story took place, I was 10 years old and living in a suburban area about an hour outside of New York City. I lived in a small community in which everyone knew everyone. My experience took place in 2006 on October 31st, Halloween. The reason I'm sharing the year with you is so you can understand why we didn't just call for help on our cell phones. We just didn't have them at our age. But you can bet we got them after this. Well, my friends and I were going around knocking on neighborhood doors to get candy, and we have been fairly successful. This spurred us to go a bit further in our neighborhood than we had in previous years, and we had lost track of time, putting the time at about 4 p.m. Around the time, our bags were getting heavy, and we were considering going back when my friend noticed a truck that was idling at the end of the street we were on. This may not sound too weird, but there was no one in the neighborhood that owned a truck like that. We decided to hit the remaining houses on the block and start heading to my house as soon as possible while keeping an eye on the truck. While we were heading up the driveway of the last house, I decided to keep an eye out on the truck. It hadn't moved from its spot at the end of the block, but it still gave me an odd feeling. As soon as we got our candy, we started the mile-and-a-half walk back to my house. There were two routes we could take, a shortcut through a wooded trail or a road that was mostly residential but also had some small commercial buildings. Being 10-year-old girls, we chose to take the mostly lit road over the dark trail in the woods. The trip was peaceful until I noticed the truck was following us. I got a cold feeling down my spine. I just knew something was wrong with the truck. It was gray with one headlight out and rust along the metal accents by the wheels and doors. To my 10-year-old self, it just looked like bad news. We had about a mile to go and we all decided to run to a store down the road to get help. We ran and the truck sped up, apparently realizing what we had planned to do. My heart was beating a million miles an hour, and adrenaline made me run faster than I ever had before. The truck cut us off, braking quickly to come to a stop in front of us. We quickly turned and ran across someone's lawn, making it to the back of the convenience store. We ran through the unlocked back door and to the cashier. We quickly and out of breath told him what was going on and asked him to please let us use the phone to call our parents, but to our horror, instead of helping us, he started yelling at us to go bother someone else and that he had no time for our childish games. We were shocked. We had never been treated like this by an adult and had no idea why this man wasn't helping us. My friend Sarah tried convincing him to at least call the police, hoping it would prove to him that we were serious and not playing a prank. He still refused to help us and forcefully let us out of his convenience store. At this point, my friend Sam was crying and I wasn't far behind. I was terrified to look at the road for fear of seeing the truck. Then suddenly, Sarah yelled at us to run and I looked up. The truck was at the exit of the convenience store's parking lot, just sitting there. We ran for our lives, the truck never far behind. Every time the truck would get too close to us, we would duck onto another block or over someone's fence to get to another street. The only reason why we were able to stay ahead of the truck was our knowledge of the roads. This person was obviously not familiar with the layout of the neighborhood. When we were about 2 blocks away from my house, we made a daring move that bought us some time. We decided to go down on a dead-end street that had a small path leading to a nearby street. only a small distance from my block, and use that path to hide in after the truck would get stuck at the dead end. The troubling part was that we didn't know whether or not the driver of the truck would follow us by foot into the woods. We decided to risk it. We ran down the road and onto the path, far enough that we could still see if the driver followed us by foot. The woods provided enough cover to hide us from the driver's sight. We split up just far enough to provide better cover and waited for the driver to make a move. While the truck idled at the entrance to the woods, I decided to climb a tree to feel safer and to become less visible. We waited for what felt like forever until the driver's door opened, revealing a middle-aged Caucasian man with long greasy hair and what I now know was a boner. He was getting himself off by chasing 10-year-old girls. I don't want to think about what would have happened if he caught us, but I have a pretty good idea of what would have happened. Nevertheless, he stalked into the woods and started looking for us. If you don't know what being hunted feels like, I hope you never do. You feel weak, helpless, and absolutely outmatched. The man was getting too close to Christina's hiding spot for my liking, so I did the only thing I could think of. I took a chocolate bar and hurled it in the opposite direction of all our spots. As soon as the bar hit the leaves and made a small crunching sound, the man whirled around and stalked in that direction. I quietly made my way down from the tree and crawled over to Sam. Sam and I made our way to Sarah and Christina, who had hid close together. We quietly decided to make a run for the end of the path while the man was quite a ways down the path, closer to where we had entered the woods. On the count of 3, we ran. We ran without looking back, but we could hear his footsteps on the trail behind us. We could see the street ahead, and we raced further. We made it onto the street and down towards my block. As soon as we were on my block, we rushed to my door, banging on it to be let me in. My father opened the door, surprised to see us covered in dirt, sweat, and tears. We told him what happened, and when we were done talking, he instantly got his rifle and went outside. The man was nowhere to be seen, but we told him where he left his truck, and he told us to stay inside with my mother. My mother called the cops and made us comfortable in the living room. My mom also called my other friend's parents. After that, the cops arrived shortly. We gave the cops our statement, and 2 cops went off to find my dad. The cops decided to check out the area to make sure the man wasn't lurking around somewhere. It was 3 hours later when we found out what had happened from my dad. Apparently, the man was trying to start his shitty truck when my dad arrived, prompting my dad to hold the man at gunpoint until the cops arrived. After the cops came and took the man into custody, and telling my dad that the man was a registered sex offender, my dad went to the convenience store where we had begged for help and apparently gave the guy a piece of his mind for not helping a group of young girls in distress. It has been 10 years since that night, and needless to say, I never went trick-or-treating without an adult again, and I never stayed out more than 2 hours. I just can't bring myself to feel enthused over Halloween anymore. I hope that creep got a long time in jail, and I hope he never does this to any girl in the future. I realize that I should provide articles for proof, but I just can't bring myself to look anything up about him. I never want to see his face again. I apologize for any inconvenience this may cause.